The Dallas Cowboys came knocking on Oregon's door once, got turned away. Turns out the second time was the charm for that organization in the NFL down in Texas, as now former Oregon wide receivers coach Junior Adams is leaving for the same position with the Cowboys. Just how big of a loss is this for the Ducks? Let's discuss. This is TSOW. Welcome to that show out west for that team out west. An unbiased, neutral observer's view of Oregon Ducks football. I'm Ted LaRue. Yesterday was Super Bowl Sunday, and although that bowl looked a lot similar to maybe another bowl that Oregon fans are very familiar with, there was certainly some Duck-centric headlines on Super Bowl Sunday that we obviously got to talk about. And that story was the departure of wide receivers coach Junior Adams. Let's not mince words. Let's not mince feelings. This is a really big loss for this Oregon Ducks football program. What Junior Adams was able to do in 3 years with the Ducks wide receivers is maybe a 3-year type of development, a 3-year period that maybe we haven't seen in Oregon football history. Like, Oregon's wide receivers were always good. Hey, maybe some years they're really good. But Junior Adams really elevated them in multiple ways, from the development, from the production, and also from recruiting and talent acquisition at the wide receiver position. This program became more explosive at that position. This program just overall became better. Ceilings and floors were raised because of the coaching and because of the development, because of the recruiting prowess of one Junior Adams. And you look at his resume, you can understand why an NFL organization like the Dallas Cowboys would be interested in someone like Junior Adams. You go all the way back to the late 2000s and the early 2010s, getting a guy and recruiting and developing a guy like Cooper Kupp at Eastern Washington. And then he recruited Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan during his time at Washington. And then when you look at the things that Coach Adams was able to do during his Ducks tenure, it once again speaks to the fact of the elevation that this wide receiver room and overall this pass game has certainly taken. Troy Franklin and Tez Johnson, both top 11 wide receivers in Oregon history in receiving yards. Franklin, 6th all-time on the list for the University of Oregon in receiving yards. He was actually less than 200 yards away from being Oregon's all-time leading receiver. Tez Johnson and Troy Franklin, top 3, 1, 2, 3 in Oregon history in receptions in a season. 2023, Tez had 86 catches. 2024, Tez had 83 catches. 2023, Troy Franklin had 82 catches. Under the tutelage and sight of Junior Adams, Troy Franklin had the best single receiving season in Ducks history in 2023. 1,383 yards. That is the most receiving yards in a single season by an Oregon Duck. The next best was Dylan Mitchell in 2018 with 1,184 yards. And here's something else worth noting. That 1,184-yard season by Dylan Mitchell was the last time that Oregon had a 1,000-yard receiver. And in 2023, the Ducks had not one, but two 1,000-yard receivers and 24 combined touchdowns from Troy Franklin and Tez Johnson that season. The 14 touchdowns from Troy Franklin in 2023 is also a single-season record for the Oregon Ducks. The next best was Jeff Mayle. He had 12 receiving touchdowns in that national championship runner-up season in 2010. Like, man, the bullet points on the resume are certainly there. And Oregon needs to find a way to maintain this standard that they have certainly set at the wide receiver position. And it's not just development, man. It's recruiting as well. The fingerprints of all things receiving is the fingerprints of Junior Adams. Recruiting talents like a DeCorian Moore and another 5-star talent like a Jerrion Dickey and a Jeremiah McClellan, like all of these great receivers that they've been able to bring in. And then you look at the transfer portal guys, the Tez Johnsons, the Trayshawn Holdens, the Evan Stewarts, like it's all over. All we have known in the Dan Lanning era at the wide receivers coach position has been Junior Adams. So we're kind of diving into a little bit of uncharted territory here. Let's talk about said territory. Where are we going to go next? We've established that Junior Adams is a hell of a coach. He's a hell of a developer. He's a hell of a recruiter. And it's going to suck not having him on this coaching staff yet again. But maybe we're going to run it back here on this show talking about a guy that we just talked about a few days ago in Rashad Samples. That was the guy that turned down the Dallas Cowboys to come back. Well, it appeared that time it was going to be the running backs coach. That's the position that the Dallas Cowboys wanted him to be. But maybe Rashad Samples is going to be able to pivot and fill that wide receivers coach opening that Junior Adams is leaving behind. Now, a lot of people are throwing that out there right now. You see these hot boards that are out there, and I've read a lot of articles on the matter, and I've listened to some podcasts and some shows on the matter, and everybody kind of seems to bring up Rashad Samples' name moving over to that position. And here's what I will say. I think Rashad Samples moving over to become the wide receivers coach. Look, is he going to be able to fill the whole shoe that was Junior Adams, at least right away? Maybe not. Hey, maybe he will be. But maybe not right out of the gate. But I think having Rashad Samples going into that role, I think you're going to be able to live in the ballpark of that standard that was set by Junior Adams for multiple reasons. Look, Rashad Samples was a wide receiver when he played in college at Oklahoma State and Houston. And he does have power for experience with the wide receiver position. In 2018, he was the assistant wide receivers coach at Texas. In 2023, the first year of Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State, he was the wide receivers coach and the passing game coordinator as well. And, you know, we're repeating something that we just talked about on this show a couple of days ago, but it is worth repeating within this context. He was a big part of the recruitment of DeCorian Moore, just like Junior Adams. Rashad Samples is an elite level recruiter. The jury obviously would still be out on his ability to develop some of these wide receivers. But right now, that seems to be the smart move. And then there's a cause and there's an effect to everything. And then the Oregon Ducks would be looking for a new running backs coach. How does that affect the development that Rashad Samples has had with some of these running backs in year one? What effect does that have with someone like a 2026 commitment in Tredarian Ball now that he's going to go over and coach the receivers? Everything has a domino effect. Relationships with position coaches are very important to specific players, of why they choose to go to somewhere out of high school, why they maybe choose to transfer somewhere as well. And the relationships, I think, are going to be very important with these wide receivers. Retainment is going to be very important now as we inch closer to spring football and as we inch closer to the spring transfer portal period. I'm not overly concerned on losing high caliber wide receivers out of this Oregon room right now. I don't think Evan Stewart is certainly going anywhere. De'Corian Moore, I just talked about how Rashad Samples was involved in the relationship building process with that recruitment certainly as well. But then you kind of go on to that next level. What's Jeremiah McClellan going to do? How much of a impact was the relationship with Junior Adams over there? Jerrion Dickey and Kyler Casper. I said it once, I'm going to say it again. The fingerprints of Junior Adams were all over this wide receiver room. Okay, right now, as it stands, I like the depth of the Oregon wide receiver room. I like what it looks like right now. But maybe some of those relationships with Coach Adams was maybe more important to some wide receivers than others. But I've got a really good feeling that this wide receiver room is going to be just fine. Hey, the grass is damn green in Eugene, right? I understand why there could be concern with the departure of Junior Adams right now. But I'm going to say this. You, I, everybody, we all need to trust Dan Lanning. Because all Dan Lanning has done is he's proven to us that when there is a coach opening, when he needs to find somebody to fill a hole on this coaching staff, he has proven to us that he is going to find a great assistant coach. He is so good at being able to identify young coaches and experienced coaches as well and fill into this coaching staff and find guys that really fit this Oregon football program and fit in what his vision is for each one of these position groups. Like, you look at some of the young coaches that he's brought in during his time at Oregon. Of course, we just talked about Rashad Samples. We're talking about Junior Adams certainly as well. How about Alik Terry on the offensive line? Of course, offensive coordinator Will Stein. Defensive backs coach Chris Hampton was just the recruiter of the year by 24/7 Sports. Brian Michalowski, inside linebackers coach. He was formerly an analyst. He got upgraded to the inside linebackers coaches last year. And you saw Bryce Betcher have a pretty solid jump and a pretty damn big development this past year. So Dan Lanning, all he has been able to do, all he's proven during his time, and that he surrounds himself with great like-minded people. Whether it's the running backs coach, whether it's the wide receivers coach, you, everybody should trust Dan Lanning that he is going to go out there and he is going to get the right guy for this Ducks program. But that still doesn't minimize the impact. That still doesn't minimize how great Junior Adams was for the Oregon Ducks. Here's one last point that I want to make. It's an overall point as it surrounds this Oregon Ducks program. The Dallas Cowboys came knocking on the door of not coordinators, not a head coach, but position coaches for this Oregon Ducks program to fill some of their voids. These type of things, the more successful Oregon is going to be, the more you're going to see this. People are noticing the type of talent, coaching-wise, that is on this staff that Dan Lanning is bringing into this staff. Folks, I said it about Rashad Samples before. He's not going to be here for long. Enjoy him while you have him. The more successful hires that Dan Lanning makes, time after time after time, the more often the Dallas Cowboys of the world and other college teams are going to be knocking on the door of the Oregon Ducks. The more successful that this program and this team becomes in the coming years, the more turnover that there is going to be, and the more tested that Dan Lanning is going to be to continue to rise to that standard as a guy that brings in great to elite level position coaches and assistant coaches. These are the prices that need to be paid when you are a program that is having as much success as the Oregon Ducks. Who do you want to be the next wide receivers coach? Leave that in the comments below. Do you think it's going to be Rashad Samples? Leave your thoughts on that switch, and maybe who would you like to see as a new running backs coach if indeed that switch is made? Leave your thoughts in the comments on all things Oregon Ducks, all things Junior Adams, all things backfilling these roles on this coaching staff. I'm Ted LaRue. This has been That Show Out West.